Hi, hey, hello. I've managed to catch another cold and I'm slowly getting over it, but in the meantime, in my pajamas with a cold sweat, let's get into what I read in April. Okay, let's get into this. The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo by Taylor Jenkins Reid. I don't know what all of the hullabaloo is about. I read The Daisy Jones and the Six a couple years ago, and it was good. I was pleasantly surprised. I'm talking about Daisy Jones, I didn't expect for this to have the emotional maturity that it did have in the end with a very prominent supporting character. I really enjoyed it. And I'm anticipating I think it's like a mini-series or series coming out for this. So I went into Evelyn Hugo with, some expectations. Like, I thought highly of Taylor Jenkins Reid as a writer until I read this, because this was very dumb. It was extremely one-dimensional. For example, whenever they talked about acting as a job, as work, it immediately led to, am I going to get an Oscar out of this? As if all acting is for an Academy Award. It was that kind of level dumb and very one-dimensional. And it had splices of like news clippings about where the characters are at a certain point in time. And you can hear the transatlantic accent. It was just very like pandering, very fanficky, very disingenuous writing. I was so I'm still surprised at how much people love this. I don't know what I'm missing. And if I'm told one more time that Evelyn Hugo has great tits, I will shred the pages out of this book and toss it into the garbage. On to slightly higher realm of thinking involved. I read Motherhood by Sheila Heti, which I loved. I'll just say I already bought multiple copies to gift for Christmas. I should have given them out for Mother's Day gifts, but it doesn't matter. Women, men, everyone should read this. The reading experience felt like living with her during a crucial point in her life as her supportive confidant, or like reading the most exquisite, insightful diary as she thinks through the most important personal life decision. If only everyone can be this introspective. I marveled at her equanimous voice, contemplating heavy thoughts like women's labor, the responsibilities and desire for procreation, for Jewish women in particular. I thought that particular passage was really interesting. The historical purpose of women and their bodies as a function of society. This is a book that I didn't highlight because otherwise I would have just highlighted every passage, like the entire book. They're not comprised of like 1 to 2 sentence pithy bangers, but more like a couple paragraphs of brain bombs. When the sun has set, the meal you eat cannot be called breakfast. I'm in the afternoon of my life. The time for children is breakfast. This is wonderful. I highly, highly recommend. I read Elena Ferrante's In the Margins, which are 4 essays on her writing process, her rules, her sensitivity, her work. Elena Ferrante, I'll just say, is one of, if not my favorite writer currently. I will read anything that she writes. So when she writes about her process, her work, like what she thinks about her work, how she comes up with her work, I will eat it up. I want to know. I didn't realize that Troubled Love was her mystery genre. The Days of Abandonment is her scenes from a marriage genre, and The Lost Daughter is her horror genre. I just, in my head, thought of them all as Elena Ferrante genres. I love any further insight into the Elena and Leila relationship dynamic. And so her passages in this book were extremely interesting. She presents a concept of the female I. She writes, patrimony inherently has no female I sentences. And I'm realizing that I constantly seek out the female I. Not gonna lie, the last essay with Dante and Proust completely went over my head because I'm just unfamiliar with the readings. I will always look into reading more Elena Ferrante with whatever she puts out because her fiction writing is superb and entrancing. And so I want to know what goes into her writing it, her thought process, her writing process, her craft. And this is another, along with her Frantumalia, piece of writing that provides insight. I read E.M. Forster's A Room with the View. I watched the movie for the first time last year, and I immediately fell in love with it. Every time I watch that movie, I have to like fluff up my hair to get into the mood of Helena Bonham Carter. But this is such a delight. It's surprisingly relatable for being a novel set during Edwardian England. You can pick out all of the different character tropes like pretentious hipster Cecil, angsty emo George with a hint of the teacher about him, that girl Miss Lavish, and Charlotte Bartlett, our bae, our background hero who's always quietly there, the comic relief. She calls Lucy Lucia while they're in Italy, and Mr. Emerson. Ooh, I want him to be my daddy. He is a breath of fresh air, a blemish in the eternal smoothness, while the rest of us are all blind in our bullshit quagmire. This book is about the facades that we put up to the world and how very silly and dumb that approach to life is. Life is a public performance on the violin in which you must learn the instrument as you go along. I love this. This is a recommendation from Ben from Doom Antidote, and I really enjoyed it. I want to read more E.M. Forster. This is the second Ben recommendation, Cold Comfort Farm by Stella Gibbons. I've never heard of this book, and I grew up being quite an Anglophile, and I've never heard of this book before. And I am living for this book cover. If ever I'm in need of a reminder of what a difference one person can make, look no further than Flora Post with her big Virgo energy in Cold Comfort Farm. Whenever I want to choose to intimidate someone, I will use her clear, steady voice. It's funny, full of British charms, but there is lots of weird stuff in this. Like, what the hell did she see in the woodshed? What are Robert Post's child's rights? That weird FaceTime scene? This is set in April, and it is some good spring cleaning motivation. This is the portion where I started a BritBox subscription and just read nothing but Agatha Christie for the rest of the month. Starting off with, why didn't they ask Evans? Because of the new Hugh Laurie adaptation, which was great. I wonder why the Kenneth Branagh movies can't be more like them. They're terrible. First of all, about Agatha Christie, if you're reading them to read a detective fiction, you're reading it wrong. Agatha Christie is a romance writer. Personally, to me, the whodunits, the plots, they're all very fun. They're very smart. They're very well thought out. But the heart of every Agatha Christie is its romance in it. And the romance in this with Frankie and Bobby is delightful. Personally, though, I prefer Tuppence. Just because Frankie's peerage just made everything too easy, it feels a little bit offbeat than your typical Agatha Christie. It's got a different pacing, so it's kind of exhilarating because you're unsure of what's afoot. The plot and title to this, including the very mysterious dying man's last words being, "Why didn't they ask Evans?" is fun enough, but a little underwhelming. It comes to the perfect romantic conclusion. And then I watched The Secret of Chimneys, which made me read The Secret of Chimneys, which came out in 1925. It's generally agreed upon that Agatha Christie's earlier works are better than her later works, and I generally agree with them, but it always feels very cluttered in an Agatha Christie where she involves international gangs and drug rings because that's not her forte. Her forte is romance, and this book is all about how great Anthony Cade is and how cool Virginia Revel is. This isn't one of her best to me at all. The movie adaptation, like most of the 2000 Miss Marples, is lame in comparison to this book, however, but the book itself is just a middling Christie, in my opinion. Which brings me to the final Agatha Christie that I read this month, which is Endless Night, which was written in 1967. This is much better than The Secret of Chimneys or Why Didn't They Ask Evans combined. I read this after watching the 2010's Miss Marple adaptation, which was very cougary fun. This is supposedly Agatha Christie's personal favorite. There's an eerie Humbert first-person vibe, so it's not surprising when the plot is revealed, but it's still very fun. And this book made me realize that Mike Rogers' obsession with his house is the reason why I'm also so obsessed with reading about houses. Like how I felt when I read Virginia Woolf's In the Lighthouse. I only felt bad for the deteriorating, crumbling house instead of any of the actual people. But the voice throughout, the subtle dialogue exchanged between characters, like between Ellie and Claudia Hardcastle when they become friends over mutual allergens, is the type of stuff that makes me love reading Agatha Christie. Her insight into humanity is so feminine and delightful. So that's everything that I read in April. That was a lot more British influence than I anticipated. I don't plan at all what I read. I'm a 100% mood reader, and I have no idea what I want to read in May. It is currently Mother's Day. Happy Mother's Day to all those who celebrate. I don't know what I want to read and I don't know what I want to get out of my May reading. I just know that I don't want to be sick again. So stay safe, stay healthy, stay well, and I hope you have a good reading month. Thanks for watching. See you next time.